Alright guys, so for our LSX454, we're gonna run this oil pan, and it is from Amazon. It is a knockoff of the 302-1 oil pan from Holley. So let's see if it fits. Let's see if it clears this, because these do have a little bit longer stroke because it's a 754, or I mean a 454. So on all your LS engines, you want to put a little bit of RTV right there, right there. Same thing in the back, wherever the main block meets the front and the rear covers. You want to put some RTV there. The oil pan comes with all the hardware and the gasket, but we're gonna replace that with the AC Delco gasket. And honestly, they look almost exactly the same, but you know, we'd rather just err on the side of caution. So we're gonna go with the GM AC Delco gasket, and we're gonna upgrade to the ICT billet bolts for the oil pan. All right, so the oil pan is on, it's torqued down. The main bolts on the oil pan, which are size 10 millimeter, those get torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. And then there's two smalls on the back, which are like M6 bolts, which are 8 millimeter. Those get torqued down to 106 inch-pounds. So that's been torqued down. Next, we're gonna spin the crank with a 24 millimeter bolt. And we're gonna line up these holes right here to the torque converter. What I like to do is I like to put these in just by hand, as far as I can. Then I spin that. I do that to all 6 bolts until all of them are in. Then after that, I start torquing them down. The torque spec on these, because these are M10 by 150 bolts, is 50 foot-pounds from ARP. If you want the part number, that's the part number that I'm using for the 480 torque converter. Usually, I put these in by hand when they're in the car, and I use a little bit of Loctite to hold them on. But since we have them out of the car, we got plenty of room. We're gonna go ahead and torque that down. So basically, we have one hole lined up. We're gonna screw this in by hand. Here, let me switch hands real quick. We're gonna screw that in by hand. Once we do that, it's a little bit off, where's the hole? So once we do that, we're gonna turn that until we see the next hole line up. Screw that one in by hand, do that 6 times, and then torque them down. All right, one more thing real quick. We're gonna use a 1/2 inch ratchet to use this with a 24 millimeter socket. Anytime you turn the engine, you wanna go in the direction that it will naturally turn, which is clockwise. You don't ever wanna turn the engine counterclockwise. If you have spark plugs in there, which we do, it'll be a little bit harder to turn because you're actually doing a compression cycle. All right, so you can see that bolt we put in. We're gonna turn it by hand. You can hear the compression. I think, nope. Is that other bolt hole? Yep. All right. So I'm gonna put a little bit of Loctite. You don't have to. I like it for insert it in. Now, if you only have 3 bolts, it's gonna be a little bit longer rotation. This was almost like every 3 pushes, it'll show up the next one. And we got one more bolt. Now what I like to do is grab the middle of the torque converter and pull it out as much as I can before I turn them down. And now we're gonna torque them all down. All right, guys, today the engine goes in the Chevelle, and we got my boy Don Slick here helping us out. So one thing you guys definitely want to check before you put everything together, we're using these adapters from Billet Specialties. We're going to use these to bolt up to our LS engine. Then we're going to use these old school mounts to bolt up to that, to adapt it to the old school Chevy purchase. One thing you want to check is to make sure this fits on there. It's the right ones, but as you can see, it's a little bit tight. So we're going to open this up a little bit. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have the engine hanging here. And then you got stuff that doesn't fit smoothly. And then you got to pull everything out and do it again. So each bracket says either P for passenger, or you'll have one that says D for driver's side. Pay attention to that. Then we're going to use these. Put a little bit of Loctite. Make sure you line them up flush. And then that'll bolt that to the engine. And then we're going to use these to bolt the adapter or the actual rubber mount to these brackets. So on things that don't really come apart over and over again for like maintenance, for example, like the drain plug for your oil, stuff like that, I don't put Loctite. But anything that I want to tighten down and make sure it doesn't come loose with vibration over time, for example, the torque converter bolts, these engine mount adapter bolts, things that I tighten down once and I want them to stay tight for like a real long time until I'm ready to take them apart, I use blue Loctite, because blue Loctite isn't as strong as red Loctite, but it keeps stuff from coming loose. So that's just one thing that you might want to consider over time. If it's going to tighten up, you want to stay tightened by itself without you loosening it up, try using the blue Loctite. It'll save you like, it'll keep stuff from coming loose. All right, so we got these adjusted so they fit. So next thing we're gonna do is we got our engine mounted, our adapters mounted. So what I like to do is leave these off, put the engine in here, drop it down where we want, and then put those on as the very last option. So that way you can figure out which bolt holes you want to use. And then it makes it a lot easier dropping the engine in when those mounts, those adapters that go here, are off. So for our 4L80E, that's going to the 70 Chevelle, we're going to use this energy suspension. I believe this transmission mount is a little bit shorter than the regular ones. So there's the part number for it. And then we're going to use the G-force cross member for the transmission. All right, guys, so just some tips to drop in the engine. It's always easier if you bring it in at an extreme angle, like you can see right here, how the transmission is tilted down, the engine is tilted up. That makes it easier to clear the front cross member with the engine mount and still get underneath the back of the firewall. And also, when possible, you might have to put a floor jack on the bottom where the transmission's at and lift up the transmission from the back, and then as you're dropping the engine forward. And like I said before, leave the motor mounts out until you get it close in place, and then you'll be able to bolt it up. You can see right there, I just jacked up the transmission from the back as I'm lowering the front. And then my guys here are watching the firewall to make sure I don't hit anything on the side. And they're trying to line up the motor mounts. So it definitely takes a little bit of practice. It's a little bit harder when you have the radiator and everything still in, or the front clip still in. But we took it out just to make it easier because we don't want to scratch anything up. But this is one of those things that you'll learn as you go. And the more you do, the easier it becomes. So right here, we have it pretty much lined up, and I'm just installing the adapters. And then as I'm putting the adapters that bolt on to the LS billet adapters to the frame, sometimes you gotta like rotate the engine or lift up one side. And I think on this one, we had issues lifting up the driver's side to get the adapter in, and the passenger side went in pretty easy. So on our combination with the G-force crossmember bracket for the transmission and the adapters that we use, we ended up clearing everything. We didn't really hit the firewall, so that's good because I've heard other people had issues. All right, guys, so we got the engine in and it's bolted down. I had plenty of clearance in the firewall, so now we got to figure out which way we're going to route the harness for the Terminator X. I'm going to leave the passenger side clear because we're going to put AC stuff, so I don't know where the lines are going to come out to this side. So I'm probably going to route it on the driver's side and probably next to the steering shaft. I have these adapters that I bought from Sharp Performance. I've used them before, and it makes installing a Terminator X wiring harness a lot simpler. You can use this discount code, and here's the website. Gives you an extra 10% off. So we're probably going to put this right here. It should fit perfectly. And then we'll start, we'll cut a hole through here and then run the wires through and probably go underneath the steering shaft. So I'll probably order one in black to make it look a little bit better. But you guys stay tuned for that. We're going to do that on the next video, right?